Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. This is Daily Politics on Trust TV. I'm Abdullahi Ahmed. Thank you most kindly for joining us tonight. Tonight, we turn our focus on developments around the polity, where ahead of the 2027 elections, the debate across the nation has been centered on a variety of issues, mostly focusing on regional developments and, of course, with growing anxiety in the north as the Arewa Consultative Forum raises concerns over premature political campaigns ahead of the 2027 elections. But beyond the politics, the ACF is demanding urgent action to end the bloodshed and insecurity still plaguing parts of the northern region. And to help us navigate some of these developments, as well as what it means for Nigeria going forward, we have with us on the program someone who is a part of the deliberations of the Arewa Consultative Forum, Dr. Usman Bugaje, a prominent voice in the ACF and a former member of the House of Representatives, who will be joining the conversation live virtually from his residence in Kaduna. Much later on the program, we turn our focus on the developments around the welfare and the well-being of the Nigerian worker, who is the backbone of the Nigerian economy, whose voice echoes across the country on this particular day. With inflation soaring and the cost of living squeezing households, labor unions have continued to demand real solutions, including a review of the retirement age and better working conditions for Nigerian workers. We'll be joined later on by Comrade Tijani Isa, who is a former vice president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, for some deep insight on this particular development and a lot more on the state of affairs. But first, we turn to Dr. Usman Bugaje, who has joined the conversation virtually from Kaduna. Doctor, good evening to you, and thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate you for joining the conversation. We're going to take a moment's break. We'll be back to set the ball in motion after this break.
In an atmosphere charged with urgency and reflection, members of the Arewa Consultative Forum converge in Kaduna to deliberate on the political, economic, and security concerns bedeviling northern Nigeria. But beyond talk, the gathering was a statement that unity, not division, must define the region's path forward. In his opening address, Chairman of the Board of Trustees, Alhaji Bashir Alhaji, declared that the North would remain faithful not to personalities or parties, but to those who promote and protect its long-term interests.
Conduct a detailed study and a review of policies, projects and programs embarked upon by the current government and determine how they have impacted the various parts of the country, particularly northern Nigeria. This is perhaps the best way to determine whether or not our interests are being sufficiently accommodated.
Alhatu also sounded the alarm over the rising insecurity in the region, urging a more coordinated and sincere effort from security agencies. Equally troubling, he noted where the attacks on the northerners residing in the south, who are often targeted simply for pursuing their livelihood.
We regret to observe that the situation, particularly that of insecurity in northern Nigeria, has not yet improved. Senseless killings have persisted in parts of Plateau, Borno, Benue, Niger, Zamfara, Kaduna, Sokoto, Katsina, Zamfara, and other parts of the north.
The forum further condemned what it described as the injustice and marginalization of indigenous people in the Federal Capital Territory, calling for an urgent policy review to address their concerns.
The indigenous people of the FCT have been forcefully driven away from their ancestral land and rendered landless and homeless through no fault of theirs. This injustice and the maltreatment of the indigenous people of the FCT Abuja call for an urgent review.
As debates heat up ahead of 2027, the forum warned against premature political campaigns, describing them as a disservice to Nigeria's democratic stability Instead, it called for a focus on governance and delivery of campaign promises. The meeting also featured presentations from strategic committees established to advise the forum. Former Minister of Interior Lieutenant General Abdurrahman Dambazo retired, and former IGP Muhammad Abubakar led the Security Committee, while ex-head of service Yala Ahmed and former SDF Babachir Lawal chaired the Peace and Reconciliation team. Former Kaduna State Governor Ahmed Makarfi headed the committee reviewing the proposed tax reform bills. The message is clear: the North is watching, and it will stand with those who serve, not exploit, its people. Bello Musa, Trust TV News Kaduna.
Thank you so much for joining us on the program once again. I don't know if you got the question, but just to recap, the North is making much of the political noise, and then we hear Arewa Consultative Forum saying, listen, quiet down the campaigning, it is not yet time. Help us make sense of why this apparent contradiction is happening.
Well, it's not a contradiction in the sense that, on the one hand, there are complaints coming not just from the North, from basically all over the country, including Lagos, the base of the president, that this government is not delivering. There are a number of difficulties that people are facing, and the government is now. It's unfair to get into politicking when we have not actually delivered your sense of government is the welfare and security of citizens. And if government has not delivered mandate and is busy fixing what do you call them, the billboards and running basically campaigns all over the place, then that government is missing the point. And I think what Arewa Consultative Forum is saying is that there will be time for politics, but this is time to deliver. What are the promises have you made to people when you came to ask for their votes? Have you really delivered on those promises? Are you really solving the problems of the country? Are you fixing the issues of security, addressing the levels of poverty, and addressing the human capital development without which this country cannot make any sustainable progress? These are the questions that are being raised. And this is exactly why the point is being made that rather than spending money in politicking, you know, putting up billboards all over the place and running all manners of campaign, you would rather concentrate on the job for which you have been elected, which this is the second year or end of the second year, and there is hardly anything to show for it. Therefore, the issue is this government should be advised to go back and do what it has been elected to do, not the wishy-washy and running around doing nothing, basically, that we have seen.
And Doctor, is it fair to point out the activities of some key political figures like the former vice president, like the immediate past governor of Kaduna State, as major distractions when it comes to the governance that you're talking about that is much needed? I mean, you look at their activities, what they've been doing, whether it's the coalition talks or the defections to SDP and things like that, one would say that that is tantamount to trying to distract the administration by kickstarting the campaigns early.
I think they are reacting to the emptiness of this particular regime. Basically, they are beginning to get ready to take, because this government is not performing. If, for example, from its inception 2 years ago, it solved the problem of electricity, it solves the problem of poverty, it solves the problem of insecurity, everybody would have been quiet by now, basically praising the government, or at least giving it time to see how far it can go. But fail deliver on any of the problems that it found on the ground. I cannot remember, and please, if I've forgotten something, remind me, if there is one single problem that this government has solved since its inception. I'm not saying there are not people who are making efforts. For example, I'm quite aware of people in uniform that are trying to bring an end to security, that have put their lives, on the line. Some of them have been killed. So yes, I'm quite aware that at a certain level, there are certain work that is being done. But this work has not as yet solved any one particular problem. And I think if you see politicians running around trying to prepare for the next election, their own evaluation is that this government is no good, is not doing anything. Let's begin as if it doesn't exist so that we can take over. So I think these activities, and I'm not necessarily supporting the activities that are taking place, because if you ask my opinion really, and I'm sure you have heard me in other forums making this point, that even the so-called opposition politicians, they have had opportunity to deliver on their mandate at some stage. Some of them were former governors, some of them were former ministers, some of them were holding different types of posts. And during their own time, except maybe one or two of them they have not themselves delivered on their own mandate. So I'm basically saying that even those who are now preparing to take over, those that you or some people are considered distraction, in themselves and by themselves, they don't represent a solution to the problems of this country. Because not only that have they failed, but you see their parties, the very political parties that they want to stand on to contest for the next election, do not stand for anything. They don't represent anything. They have no content, they have no conscience, no courage. And therefore, I'm not necessarily supporting the fact that what they are doing is going to likely bring about any solution. But let's not distract from the more important point. And what is that point? It is the point that this government of this president in the last 2 years has not been able to solve a single problem it met on the ground. If anything, it created more problems than they met on the ground. Look at the devaluation of the naira. How many people, how many businesses have been killed because of that? How many students have failed to complete their postgraduate training, especially outside the country, to come back with the skills that we need, simply because suddenly this has been done, and what provisions they have had now, if you change it into dollars, it cannot pay for their fees. And these are including governments that have been, students that have been sponsored by governments. Government itself could not find more money to be able to meet up with that. Look at the prices of petrol. Look at the prices of electricity. Look at. So really, this government should not complain that politicians in the opposition are ganging up to take over power. It is its own fault by not delivering on its own mandate, by not meeting the expectations of those who voted it into power, by not doing what it should be doing. And therefore, for it to go back and start complaining, I think is an insult to our intelligence.
Well, Doctor, how do you respond to the comments coming from different parts of the country, alluding to how northern elites like you, for instance, have already delivered a premature verdict about the performance of an administration that is not even 2 years old in terms of running the affairs of this country? I mean, in 28 days, the administration would have reached the halfway mark. Do you think this verdict of yours about the Tinubu administration's performance is premature, given the scale of the problem that he's inherited and how much more he still has left to go?
You see, those who claim that this is premature, I think are ignorant of modern governance. In modern governance, you can evaluate a government in the first 100 days. You can see the government from the appointments it makes. You can see the government from the policies it announces. You can see the government from the budget that it does. And in all these evaluations, you don't have to wait for 2 years. You don't have to wait for even 1 full year to be able to evaluate a government. And these projections are done scientifically. It's not just based on whims or caprices or just sheer political opinions. No. So this government has shown right from the start that they have no ability to solve the problems of this country. And this 2 years, right, for goodness sake, even if the traditional political by the time you should be able to show really you can or you cannot.
And when the presidency says that all of these distractions are coming from the north and you're basically trying to give a dog a bad name, talk to me about some of the narratives that we've heard recently around the marginalization of the north. What are your 2 cents about it? Do you think this administration has done anything that suggests that the north is being sidelined in the grand scheme of things?
I think this government is grateful, and it appears to be overwhelmed and confused, because I thought they would remember that nearly 60% plus of their votes came from the north. Well, at least that's what INEC claims, and the courts upheld. So we work with what what the courts say, and we know very well that the president did not win his in Lagos, right? And so how can you ever think of blaming the north that gave you the votes to be there? I mean, it's the height of ingratitude, and I think the north has every reason to be angry. Now, there are people who talk about the north being poor and therefore they can always use money to buy off votes. There are people who are saying all manners of things. That's okay. Let them say what they want to say, and let us wait for 2027 and let us see. Here, I'm not saying the north is going to do one thing or the other, but like I started saying, the test of the pudding is in the eating. Let us see how things will go.
And Doctor, do you blame others who point out to what they perceive as double standards? That the Arewa Consultative Forum, for instance, has given the Buhari administration a lot of latitude, a lot of grace to try so many things and fail spectacularly over the course of 8 years, but it is appearing to run out of patience with an administration that is barely 2 years old. Do you think there's double standards there?
Well, you need to look at not just the Arewa Consultative Forum, but if you want to discuss this particular position, Arewa Consultative Forum has its own spokesman, Professor Tukur, who can address this matter. But for what I know, some of us who are northerners have come up from day one to challenge Buhari's administration. We did not spare Buhari's administration one bit until he finished his 8 years term. And there are a number of people from the north who did exactly, what some of us did. And so it's not a fair assessment to say that there's any particular double standard. If for whatever reason, ACF, which is a northern platform, or one of the many northern platforms has failed, you cannot use that to determine, the north entirely. If you really want to be fair and want to be fair, then you have to take the range of the northern platforms and see what have they actually said the time of Buhari. And we kept saying the point, and we've been consistent on that Buhari's regime was a disaster to the north and a disaster for this country. And we are still talking about, we are still suffering from his misrule. And I'm surprised that some of these people who serve in his government are still working about, of course, using the monumental failure of this particular regime to even claim that in their own time, I think at least things were not as worst as they are today. I mean, it's very sad for this country that people are competing in terms of failures, achievements.
So, Doctor, the recent political conversations, especially one that is tied to the 2027 election, has been about regional power shifts, whether the next political or election cycle will be dominated by people from the South, because there's this understanding that the South should still get the presidency for the next 4 years until the rotation comes back to the North in 2031. Give me a sense of what you think some of your colleagues in the forum think about this, because the body language of some of those who have spoken to the media is suggesting that maybe the North could once again present another candidate in 2027.
Well, democratically, there's no law that says that the North cannot contest, right? So this talk about the North and the South, for me, and there are quite a number of people from the North that share this view, it is actually a distraction in the sense that it takes away the most important issue to be discussed. That should be in the conversation. And what is that? The quality of leaders. For me, the fact that you come from the North doesn't necessarily make you a good leader. And Buhari has shown clearly that coming from the North does not automatically, in fact, you can be the worst leader. So I think what we should be discussing is not where you come from, the kind of person you are. In any case, the major problem of this democracy in the last 25 years has been the fact that we have no criteria for leadership selection. The criteria we have in the Constitution, I keep saying, which is basically the age and secondary school certificate, is a criteria for eligibility. It simply means that you are eligible, but it doesn't make you suitable. And because we have no criteria for suitability, we have ended up with the worst of us. We have ended up with crooks. And I think the conversation should be, what is the criteria for leadership? What kind of criteria are we looking for when we start considering somebody to be the president of this country? It's not where he comes from as much as what he represents, what he stands for, what competences he's bringing on the table. If we keep talking about North and South and South and North and West and East, and then we just simply, it's a way of avoiding discussing the real issue. For me, it's not where you come from, like what exactly you present. If you are a crook, the fact that you come from the North doesn't qualify you, and I don't want you. And we have seen people who have come from the North who are crooks and who have stolen and destroyed the economy of this country. So how does that help the North? So this argument needs to be honestly jettisoned completely so that we can now focus on the criteria for leadership. What are the challenges? The criteria for leadership must be matched against the challenges that this country is facing. We need somebody who understands economics, the character that he can stand and make sure that people do not steal public resources for personal gains and aggrandizement. And therefore, these are the kind of things we should be looking for. We should be looking for somebody with character, with competence, with conscience, with courage. These are the kind of things we are looking for. And that is the kind of conversation we should be having, honestly, not where he comes from. Where he comes from can be important in one way or the other, but it doesn't form the core requirement for becoming the president of this otherwise great country.
And Doctor, do you sense a shift politically happening right now with some of the defections that we're witnessing so far? It is the beginning of what looks like a tsunami. You've termed it political prostitution. I think that's a fairly apt way to put it recently. But do you feel the North is looking at an alternative for the president in 2027? I mean, we're seeing the groundswell of support in the South and the Southeast, for instance.
You see, these people who are changing, moving from one party to the other, whether they are moving to, they are, like I said, absolutely political prostitutes. These are people who are dangling in terms of money or in from the EFCC or ICPC, or maybe they're looking for some appointment. Whatever way you look at it, this is political prostitution. So please forget about that. They are of no use, even to the so-called moving. They are a baggage. They don't represent for me anything. Seeing through all these gimmicks. So what is important, I think, for now, is to develop a criteria for leadership and to have an elite consensus as to where we want this country to be. We want this country in the next 10 years to have taken all the 20 million children out of school back into the classroom. We want this country to reduce its infant and maternal mortality rate, which at the moment is in the same league with DRC Congo, the same league with Southern Sudan, in all the war-ravaged countries. We want this country to make sure that they create 2 to 3 to 5 million jobs for young people. We want this country in the next 10 years to skill up so that we can process our agricultural products. We want this country to have skills to process our lithium, to process our coltan, to process all the very important minerals that we have and which the world needs, which the technology of the 21st century is anchored on. And therefore, how do we make, process this? We have got so much. These are the kind of things we should be discussing. We are going to be 5 billion. How do we feed? Or a few years back, the deficit is about 30 million metric tons in terms of grains deficit in this country. How do we produce our agricultural produce to meet this particular deficit? We have until just recently 33 million Nigerians on the verge of starvation. How do we deal with that? These are the issues to be discussing. And where do we find leaders who understand these issues, address this particular problem? But not this political prostitute that moved from one party and are looking for this and that. For goodness sake, let's put them in the dustbin of our politics and let us come up with some fresh people with ideas, with courage, with the clean records that will allow us to hope that they can actually take this country to where it should be.
And Doctor, a lot of people have pointed out that with 19 northern states, the Arewa Consultative Forum, in terms of talking about some of these structural issues that you talked about, poverty, the insecurity in the northern part of the country, which is also part of the concerns raised recently, the underdevelopment, the out-of-school children, the unemployment rate, the crisis in the mining industry, and so on and so forth. Where is that energy to hold accountable the 19 governors in the northern part of the country to say, listen, we need you to address some of these issues? A lot of people have pointed out that the North or the northern elites need to do some self-reflection, as pointed out by the current governor of Kaduna State, who says northern leaders are responsible for the current state of affairs in the north.
You keep coming to this point, and I keep reminding you, I personally, I don't have hope in a great majority of the government in the United States. And I'm not saying this because I'm papers, just looking at social media, have engaged them. I have interacted with them, and they are a great disappointment. Some of them you can say there was no way they could have performed anyway, because they are coming, from a background that has not prepared them to take those particular positions. They were just spit in there as robots, or if you like, stooges of some big political people that want to continue taking away the resources of the state into their own pockets. So look, let's start afresh. Let's start looking for people who can actually deliver. For goodness sake, I don't see any hope in 19 government. I mean, if you want for the avoidance of that, we can engage them. But I've done so for for more than a decade now. And we have sat with them, we have given them ideas. We engage them, and they are simply not prepared to do what they should be doing. And I don't see any reason why we should be wasting our time. We should be looking for a change. We should be looking for a generation of people who will come into politics and with the preparedness, with the competences that are required, with the preparedness. And these efforts are being done. And remember, it's not just the ACF alone. There is the Northern Elders Forum. There is the Arewa Movement for Good Governance. There are a number of other northern political platforms that are working together. In fact, part of the proposal last meeting was that ACF itself should bring in all these other platforms so that there can be synergy, so that there will be some kind of, if you like, consensus as to the direction that we should be moving in. I mean, the direction we should be moving towards. And therefore, these are the things to consider. Don't just look at the ACF alone and what it has done, what it has not done. No, there are other players on the same terrain that are working. And it has been appreciated now that it is time to bring all these efforts into some kind of synergy so that we can have better results.
And talk to me about what's been happening over the past couple of weeks or months in North Central, for instance, Plateau, Benue, Kwara, Kebbi, Niger State to some extent, and even Nasarawa State, with some of the security concerns there, because the forum did spotlight some of those issues as one of those developments that require urgent attention. And down in the northeast, we understand that the Boko Haram insurgency is regaining some of the grounds it has lost to many of the armed forces. What are your thoughts about the management of the security question which has plagued this part of the country for the past 1.5 decades?
Okay, let me first say that I am aware that there are people in the security system that are doing their best, that are putting their lives online, that are dying to address this issue. But I don't think the government at both state and national, especially the security institutions themselves, are prepared to bring this to an end. I don't think the political will to solve the problem of security is simply not there. And as one of the former retired generals said in our meeting of the ACF, that this thing has extended and will continue precisely because in the military institutions and people in government, civilians in government institutions have connived to make this insecurity a huge source of personal resources. And for as long as this corruption continues, for as long as this insecurity will continue, realize that the governments they have and the institutions they have are not really prepared to bring an end to the security, the better for them so they can find an alternative. How long has this thing been on, for goodness sake? What does it take to bring down Siraj army? With the technology of the 21st century, you can deal with this matter in 1 month. One retired general said, maximum 3 months we can deal with these issues if we really have the political will. But there's no political money. Blood, people are dying. So let's just call this, nonsense for what it is. If this government or any government wants to stop this, it can do so. And the fact that it has run for all these years confirms to everybody that it is because people are making huge amount of money out of this insecurity. Yes, there are foreign powers that are interested, but they have to find the space for them to do what they are doing. But essentially, it is we, our government, and it's important that in the next election, we should be a lot wiser than we have been.
Does it bother you that you have northern figures in charge of some of these very sensitive security agencies, and it does appear that the problem is still there, irrespective of how close they are? I mean, the Ministry of Defense, for instance, you have the former governor of Jigawa State and the former governor of Zamfara State deputizing. The Chief of Defense Staff is from Kaduna. The National Security Advisor, whom many say has been doing a great job coordinating the operations and things like that, is also from a part of the north that has been plagued by the insurgency. Does it bother you more that the people saddled with the responsibility of restoring law and order and security to the north are from the north?
You remember I started by saying or admitting that I'm aware that there are people who are, but there are few and not in a position to do more than what little they are doing. So yes, I recognize there are a few, but a great majority, including the northerners who are in these positions, a great majority. I make exceptions, and I repeat, there are exceptions, but the majority of them are not really prepared. They are just following and making the best of the situation, and that's exactly what they do. And these are matters that people now know. If you read the social media, not that you believe everything that you read, but you see consistently connections established between these same people that you have said from the north, who are supposed to be in the government trying to, are connected to the bandits. So what else, what evidence more do you require?
And Doctor, is it fair to say that beyond just commentary, the ACF, with all its resources and connections, is actually trying to solve the problem instead of just, lamenting?
You see, the ACF is only one of, other northern platforms that is making the effort. And the ACF has its own limitations. So let's not talk as if the ACF is the one northern platform that is there to solve all the problems that we're talking about. It has done its bit, it's still doing its bit, it needs to do more. For example, one of the points I made at that meeting, after we have submitted our report, I said, if you go through our report, you will see that we have made references to reports after reports after reports after reports on the same subject, which have not been implemented. And therefore, the problem is not setting up a committee coming up with ideas. The problem is within us that we have been unable to implement any report that has been brought by committees that have been set up. And that the next meeting must address this single but most important issue. What's the use of setting up committees and then you get reports and you put them on the shelf, and then after some time things get worse and then you set up another committee and then you come back again? I mean, you will appear stupid, really, that all you do is setting up committees and not implement. But why can't we implement these reports? I mean, I do understand some of the reports we call on government to do this, government to do, and I think we should, graduate out of calling government to do anything. Because I have not seen in the last 25 years one problem that this democratically elected leaders have solved in this country. And if there is, I'm ready at least to learn.
Doctor, I wonder where your political support is going towards ahead of 2027. There's a lot of groundswell support from the North, for instance, for this coalition. We don't know what form it will take, but it's surely generating quite a lot of interest. What do you think about the coalition, and what do you think are the chances that it could be a game changer in 2027?
The moment I have no party, and I do not believe in any of the parties as currently constituted. And all these political leaders running in and out of one party or the other and having meetings, I don't think they have the capacity to solve the problems of this country. I'm hoping that in 1 year, we can mobilize fresh faces, fresh efforts, clean people, dedicated, with the courage, with the capacity, with the conscience to come and lead this country. But I'm sick and tired of these politicians in the last 25 years that are stuck in the National Assembly. All they do is to help any crook that comes to continue to steal the public resources while they just amass their wealth. You can see now the National Assembly is literally dead. It cannot check the excesses of the executive arm of government. So are the parliament in the states. So really, this lot that are coming and going and saying this, saying that, are precisely the problems of this country. I can't see how they can be part of the solution.
Doctor, am I right to say that you're politically inactive could be understood to mean that you're politically retired from active politics? Is that what you're saying?
I just don't believe in any of the parties at the moment.
Right.
Maybe as we are working and engaging, we may find a party that would be ready to take on some of the ideas that we are putting. One of the ideas, for example, is to have a collegiate leadership. And what does that mean? It means a leadership of a team of people with the necessary competencies, with the necessary courage, with the necessary character, ready to go into a party and contest for elections, so that when they win at every level, they will work together to fix this country. At the moment, what you have individuals with ambition, with a lot of money. God knows where they made this money, but people have ideas of where they make this money, and then they just simply want to use political platforms to come into power. And once they are there, they become the king and the autocrats, and their wives will become the Queen Elizabeth, and their son will be the princess, and so this is what we have been doing in the last 1-2 decades. And this is exactly what has killed this country. For goodness sake, how can we continue with this stupidity that has brought us in the depth of the problems we are having now? We have to start coming with fresh ideas, a break from this nonsense. Let us get a team of people that are committed. This is what Singapore did to be where it is. This is what China is doing to be where it is. This is what South Korea did to be where it is. So any country that has made any meaningful development in the last 2-3 decades has used a form of collegiate leadership, and they have created a criteria. Here it is just one person with his ambition, and what people talk about is my turn. Look at where we are now in this country. Very, 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 very frustrating and very sad that a country with this potential, the whole Africa is waiting for to provide leadership, has now gone down the drain to the abyss, with development indices similar to DRC Congo, similar to South Sudan, even that Syria have better indices have in Nigeria. All because individuals with ambition have clouded the space, and they just want to rule by whatever means possible, because they want to have influence, they want to amass wealth, and they cannot even see that the country itself may not sustain this kind of what's the word to use, this gluttony, if use. I mean, they just and their ambition that they are ready to push it to the point where the country can go to blazes.
All right. And on that note, Dr. Usman Bugaje, thank you so much for joining the conversation this evening. We do appreciate you for taking the time. Thank you for your time on Daily Politics this evening. All right. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you most kindly for joining us. Daily Politics returns tomorrow with another edition of the program. We do hope you make time and join us tomorrow at 8 p.m. Until next time, I am Abdullahi Ahmed. Good evening.